Thank you, Mr. Facilitator, for the promotion. To be brief, I will skip some of the sections of the cluster, including some addressed by other delegations, and our longer remarks will be on PaperSmart and on Treaty Tracker. On the EIA process, we believe the agreement need not specify a high level of detail, but should focus on the procedural steps necessary to ensure the completeness, transparency and scientific integrity of assessments in ABNJ. These include screening, scoping, a draft assessment, review and consultation by stakeholders, the taking into account of comments, decision-making procedures, and monitoring, review and reporting. They also include procedures by which a state party may request a review of an EIA or a decision not to prepare one by the scientific committee established under the instrument. So to answer your question, we believe there must be a clear link between the assessment and decisions on whether an activity can proceed, and if so, under what conditions. This includes decision-making procedures that would ensure that if it is assessed that a proposed activity may have significant adverse effects, and that would be our suggested standard, Mr. Facilitator, the activity is managed to prevent such impacts or not authorised to proceed, as well as provisions for monitoring, review and regular reporting. Impact assessments should be impact assessments should be effects-based rather than activity-based. Any activity with the potential to affect the ocean or seabed beyond national jurisdiction should be subject to the instrument's EIA requirements. Otherwise, there will be potential for forum shopping and wide variability in EIA practice. An activity-based approach may provide a loophole which may be widely regretted in years to come. If it allows an activity with widespread effects in ABNJ to escape assessment, if it is released, for example, 1 kilometre inside an exclusive economic zone. By analogy, in national jurisdictions, we have seen some activities exploit similar loopholes in national legislation to avoid assessment in one zone, say within a 12-mile zone, by situating themselves just outside the 12-mile zone, where the effects will be felt overwhelmingly within that zone. Finally, Mr. Facilitator, on some of your other questions, how would the implementing agreement relate to global and sectoral bodies? We believe the most robust standards applying to the environmental impact assessment in ABNJ should apply to all activities. It is important that the higher substantive as well as procedural standards apply across ABNJ. Under this approach, for example, activities such as seabed mining, some types of marine scientific research and other activities that may have significant adverse effects on VMEs must be assessed and managed to avoid such effects or not allowed to proceed. This is essential to avoid undermining the many years of work that RFMOs and many member states have devoted to assessing and managing bottom fishing to avoid significant adverse impacts on VMEs from other causes. Secondly, EIA requirements must apply not only to the high seas, but all areas beyond national jurisdiction, including the area which is part of ABNJ. It is important that there are no exceptions to the scope of conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in ABNJ. The minimum standards and procedures to be developed under the instrument should be applicable throughout. Activities such as mining and bottom fishing impact the seabed and sometimes also the water column. For example, some recent proposals for seabed mining may entail significant discharges of sediment into the water column, not only near the seabed but even in the twilight zone, much closer to the surface than to the seafloor. And secondly, activities involved in the deep seabed could include bioprospecting for marine genetic resources and marine scientific research as well as fishing and mining. It is not difficult to conceive of a new activity such as a geoengineering proposal which could have significant adverse effects on the deep seabed. Finally, we can see the BBNJ instrument providing helpful assistance in bottom fishing, seabed mining and other activities. To give one example, the ISA is developing EIA requirements under the exploitation regulations, and we can see a role for the BBNJ minimum standards, procedural requirements and other provisions to enhance this process. Likewise, the ISA has competence and controls seabed mining activities through REMPs and environmental impact assessments, but not other activities such as fishing and new and emerging activities. SEAs, where they impact all activities and and all impacts, and EIAs through cumulative impact assessments will need to address all activities and impacts that may be involved. Thank you, Mr. Facilitator.